the Sultan's fleet been reduced that when hostilities commenced in August, he had only 2 first-rates and 3 frigates, as the sad remains of the once powerful Turkish fleet. This fleet Muhammad positively refused to give up and return to the Sultan, and declared if the powers attempted to take it from him, he would burn it. In this posture affairs stood when in 1840 England, Russia, Austria and Prussia interposed and determined on the settlement of the difficulty, for it is evident if let alone, Muhammad would soon become master of the Sultan's throne. The letter of ultimatum was handed to the Pasha on the exact date, 11th of August 1840, which signified the voluntary end of the Ottoman Empire into the hands and control of the 4 nations. The Sultan became like a puppet just in the same way as the Greek Empire in 1449. So what happened in 1449? We had 4 angels let loose, and we had the emperor surrendering his power. And what took place in 1840? We have the 4 powers, the 4 angels closing and restraining the Ottoman Empire. And what did they do? They surrendered their power to these 4 powers, or these 4 angels. Verse 16, and the number of the army of horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the numbers of them. And the Greek and Hebrew is translated actually as myriads. And here we have some references in the Bible that thousands is represented as myriads. It was the Turkish method of numbering. They numbered it by tomans. A toman is 10,000 people, or the number 10,000, or myriad. Gibbon himself uses this very term when he describes the Turks. Alluding to Timur the Lame, the leader of the Tartars or Eastern Turks from Mongolia, he says this: the sea, the Bosphorus, rolled between the 2 continents of Europe and Asia, and the lord of so many tomans or myriads of horse was not master of a single valley. And of the Turkish invasion of Asia Minor, he says, the myriads of Turkish horse overspread a frontier of 600 miles from Taurus to Erzurum. Verses 17 to 18, and thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire and of jacinth and brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. By these 3 was the 3rd part of men killed, by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. The word jacinth is jacinth in the Greek and denotes the color blue. Thus, when it speaks of fire and jacinth and brimstone, it means red, blue and yellow. Fire is red, jacinth is blue, and brimstone or sulfur is yellow. Red, blue and yellow. These were the colors of the uniforms of the Turkish army. And Dubus, an English scholar writing at the time, says this: from their first appearance, the Ottomans have affected to wear warlike apparel of scarlet, blue and yellow, a descriptive trait the more marked from its contrast to the military appearance of Greeks, Franks or Saracens, who were contemporary of the time. At this time, gunpowder and guns were used for the first time against the people in Eastern Europe. When the pistols were held close to the horses as they rode to the attack, it looked like fire and brimstone came from the mouths of the horses. This is also the time that knights in armor weren't much use anymore, as the armor could not stop the bullets. Tails, in verse 19, for their power is in their mouth and in their tails, for their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with many of them, and with them they do hurt. The Turks' peculiar ensign, the standard that they used to represent authority, was a horse's tail. From prime vizier to the governors of provinces, the horse's tail was the badge of authority. As Eliot says, the ensign of 1, 2 or 3 horse tails that marks distinctively the dignity and power of the Turkish Pasha. And here we see a standard with 3 horse tails. What else does tails a mouthpiece means? In the book of Isaiah chapter 7 verse 4, we have reference to tails meaning the enemies to God's people. And at this time, under the 6th trumpet, there were many Christians persecuted. We also have tails in Isaiah chapter 9 verse 15, representative of false prophet. And we found that in Islam there was a false prophet, Muhammad, and all the imams and mullahs, they are also false prophets. And the mouthpiece, Aaron was Moses' mouthpiece. So we have false prophets working through Islam, the mouthpiece of Satan. Protestantism. It is also fascinating to learn that the Ottoman Turks in particular were a great aid to the Protestant Reformation. When Turks were invading Europe, King Charles V of Spain was Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. This was the Roman Catholic political empire of the Middle Ages. Protestantism had risen in 1517, and thousands of people had left Mother Church to become Protestants. Charles V, being a devout Roman Catholic, was fervently persuaded by his church not only to oppose the Protestant faith, but to destroy it. But whenever he advanced to attack the Protestants, so often tidings would come that the Turks were on the attack, and Charles would be forced to turn away from the Protestants and march against the Turks. History is very clear that had it not been for the Turks, Protestantism would never have survived. In the 16th and 17th centuries, support and encouragement for Protestants and Calvinists were one of the fundamental principles of the Ottoman policy. And there would have been no Protestantism had there been no Turk. Or God would have used another means. And here we find Constantinople, that under the sixth trumpet, Constantinople was eventually destroyed. On April 6, 1453, Muhammad II assembled 258,000 men to commence the attack. Using cannons, the city was taken 29th of May, 1453. And here we see Constantinople where it is, and today it's modern Turkey. And it was eventually destroyed. Lessons learned. And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of silver and gold and brass and stone and wood, which neither can see nor hear nor walk, neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. And under the seventh trumpet, brethren, these men will be destroyed. Here we see lessons that God wanted people to learn. The Roman Church was worshipping images, and they worshipped dead people as saints. When you worship the dead, you really worship devils. People also make idols of gold and silver, money, always trying to get as much as they can away from other people. The murders, thefts and sorcery are all part of the false system of worship and the persecution of all who differed with them. The fornication is when the church uses the government power to force her religion on others. Sadly, the Roman Church did not learn its lessons from these woes. If we have hard times or trouble comes into our lives, it is good to see and learn into some lessons that we should learn. Second world characteristics. It was Turkish Islam, a power from the bottomless pit. It was sudden and violent in nature, with an emphasis on the use of gunpowder. They were to slay or kill the Eastern pagan Rome, and during this time, Papal Rome was also slain by atheistic France, which was also another power that came from the bottomless pit, and the deadly wound was inflicted, and the Second World ended on 22nd of October 1844. How do we know that the Second World ended in October 1844 when you might be thinking it was 11th of August 1840? Well, when you look at the sixth trumpet and the seventh trumpet, between the sixth trumpet and the seventh trumpet, okay, we find Revelation chapter 10 and Revelation chapter 11. And what takes place in chapter 10 is the history of the Advent movement between 1840 and 1844. We also find that in chapter 11 we have the deadly wound in 1798. And also before Ellen White came on the scene as a prophet, there were two prophets before Ellen White. There was William Foy and Hazen Foss. William Foy in 1842, he had three visions. The second of his visions, the first and second visions, he documented and published. And in this second vision, he relates that he heard the angel saying that the sixth trumpet was still sounding.